Everyone, my name is Heather Francis and I'm here today to talk to you about analyzing curriculum for evidence of bias. First of all, why look for bias in curriculum? As critical educators, it's important to consider and question the underlying values, assumptions, and worldviews that are put forth in our curriculum materials. For example, when looking at curriculum, we may ask, whose voices are included? Whose voices are missing? Or, what stereotypes are perpetuated in these materials? By analyzing curriculum for evidence of bias, we can better help all of our students feel included in our learning environments. Today, I am going to share how I analyzed a world history textbook to learn how it portrays the Arab world, Muslims, and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I'll begin with sharing what I found and conclude with a critique of the materials. In looking at these materials, I first asked myself how Muslims in the Arab world were portrayed. I found that Muslims in the Arab world were portrayed primarily in three ways: in relation to modernization, the importance of resources, and the role of gender. This textbook focuses on how the Middle East has cast off Western rule and has begun to modernize. This modernization is said to be predicated on diversity and nationalism, and the authors share that while the Middle East is primarily home to Muslims, it is also home to Christians and Jews. The focus on modernization in the text is tightly linked to an emphasis on resources, including oil and water. The text says that in many cases, peace hangs in the balance where water is concerned, and the authors hypothesize that water, not oil, will soon become the most important resource in the Middle East. Gender is also prominently featured in the textbook. Much of the discussion of gender focuses on how, in recent decades, many Muslim women have returned to wearing hijab. In addition to women's dress, the text discusses how all women need to realize their full potential in the Arab world. Specifically, it discusses how some women in the Arab world are now able to vote, get an education, and drive. Now that we better understand how Muslims in the Arab world are portrayed, let's look at the portrayal of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. To start, let's consider how the textbook uses maps to convey information. The textbook labels Israel in all maps, but does not label Palestine. Yet the textbook uses photographs to portray Muslims and Jews cohabitating in cities like Jerusalem, saying that the city is incredibly diverse. When discussing the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the authors talk about the birth of Israel. They note that this birth occurred following the Second World War, when the UN drew up a plan to partition Palestine into a Jewish and Arab state in order to provide a Jewish homeland. They note that while Jews agreed to the plan, the Arabs did not. Thus, the response to the call for a partition of land in Palestine is framed in the text as Palestinian resistance. Readers learn that young Palestinians mounted intifadas, or uprisings, against the Israeli occupation. Now that we have a better understanding of the portrayals of Muslims, the Arab world, and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in this world history textbook, you may be wondering, are these portrayals biased? Let's take a closer look. First, let's return to our questions we can ask ourselves about bias in curricula. Whose voices are included? Whose voices are missing? What stereotypes are used? When I think about whose voices are included in this textbook, I notice the centering of Israel. There is most prominent representation of Israel in the maps, and the birth metaphor used to describe how Jewish people came to occupy land in Palestine. When I ask myself whose voices were missing in this textbook, I noticed that Palestine was both absent in maps and also in the framing of Palestinians as Arabs. This framing does not give voice to or honor the national identity of the many displaced Palestinians around the world. When I examine the stereotypes that are used in this text, I notice that both Muslims and the Arab world are frequently essentialized. By talking about the need to modernize the Arab world, the text implies that the world is backward, at least by Western standards. By focusing on the importance of resources, the text perpetuates the narrative that all conflict in the Middle East occurs because of oil. Finally, by focusing on women's dress and suggesting that the hijab is oppressive or simply a rejection of Western culture, the text does not honor Muslim women's choices of how they express their religion. To recap, this textbook did have bias in portrayal of Muslims, the Arab world, and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. As an educator, I must next consider how I will work against these biases. Where are the biases in your curricula? I hope you'll keep asking yourself questions about the materials you use with your students. Because remember, by analyzing our curricula for biases and drawing on additional materials to overcome those biases, we can help more of our students to feel included. If you like this video and want to check out more of my thoughts on education, please visit heathersfrancis.com/blog. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.